pattern. So I'm going to be using a very easy method which I hope you will pay attention to, and of course if you pay attention to it, you're surely going to learn a thing or two. Especially this is really helpful to beginners. Even if you're not a beginner, I hope you'd learn one or two things from the method I'm going to be using. So this is it. This is the corset we'll be making. So this is it. I didn't add any allowance. I just drafted and I used my tape to make it all come together. So you see what we'll be making today. So this is how it looks inside. So it's a cropped corset. It looks just how it should, right? So let's go into the video. So I've got everything I need for the video. I've got, rather for this pattern, I've got my tape, my marking tool, and my paper, scissors, my ruler, my pattern paper, and then I've got my curve tool. This is actually a French curve. So whatever curve tool you have, pattern master, this, whatever, it will surely do. So these lines I just did here, you could actually use it for allowance, but I wouldn't be adding any allowance on this pattern. So if you want to go ahead, you can just start without making these lines, but I decided to put these lines. So the first thing I'm going to do is to divide my shoulder measurement. Dividing my shoulder measurement, I got 7.5. That is 15 divided 7.5. And then I mark my arm side line. I'll be using 8. You could actually choose to make it more than 8, rather less than 8, or depending on the size of the person, whatever works for you will be fine. I'm going to be connecting the dots I've made with a line. So maybe I failed to mention this at the start, but this corset pattern, I'll be starting from the basics. That is from drafting a basic bodice block. We'll be drafting it and manipulating it into making a corset. Yeah. So maybe I failed to mention it at the start, but now you know. So on this line, on the chest line, the upper chest line, I'm going to be marking on it my bust measurement, which has already been divided into 4. So 36 when divided by 4 gives 9. So for my bust measurement, I'm marking 9 inches. And the next thing I'm going to be marking is my waist measurement of 17. So after connecting these dots, next I'm going to do is to mark on my waist circumference, which has already been divided into 4. So I'll be using 8 inches because 32 when divided by 4 gives you 8. And then I'll go ahead to connect my bust circumference line with the waist line. And then this part won't actually be needed, but then for the beginners, you could use this. We wouldn't be needing, except you'll be wanting to put a yoke on your corset. Then you need this part to be useful to you. So let me just mark the neck depth to be 4 inches and the width to be 3 inches. And I'll connect with my curve tool. And then I'll go down by 1 inch here, which will be for the shoulder slope or slant. And I'll use a much shorter ruler to connect, to form the shoulder slope. So when we're done with the shoulder slant, we're going to measure this part, and whatever we get, we'll divide by 2, which is 3.5. And then I'll go in by half an inch. You could actually go in by 0.75 inch, your choice. And then I want to connect the lines, making sure that the curve tool touches the 0.5 inch that I took inside. Yeah, so that is it for the basic bodice. I wouldn't be attaching any dart here for now, yeah, until later on. Hope you understood up to this point. So now let's go into our corset making proper. We're making a cropped corset, and it will be in 3 pieces. It's a 3-piece corset. What I mean by that is you'll be having 1, 2, 3. There are ones that are just 2 pieces. You just have this center piece, and you have the inner piece, and you have the outer piece, or the center and the side. All right. So we'll be making a three, just exactly, so just something like this is what we'll be making, the cupped piece. So we have 1, 2, 3. This is where it was joined. So you see, we have 3 pieces. So the first thing we'll be doing is to mark our shoulder to bust point or nipple measurement. So whatever you have, you mark. So for me, I'll be using 10 inches. So you just mark from the high part of your neck, then go on top the bust to the bust point to the nipple, and whatever you have there, remember, is what you're using for your bust point. So this stands as our bust point line. Now the next thing you want to do is to measure from the high part of your neck to under the bust, So whatever you get, you could actually remove one. If you got 13 or 14, you could actually remove an inch, whatever. For me, I'll be using exactly what I measured. So for me, I'll be using 13. The bust size isn't all that big, so, and I got 13, so 13 is appropriate for this. Done. So I already have my waist measurement, right? Yeah. So now what you're going to do is the bust span. From one bust point to the other, you're going to measure. Just measure. You measure from one bust point to the other. Whatever you get is what you're going to divide into 2. That is your bust span. If you have 7, if you divide into 2, you have 3.5, right? So for me, I'll be using 8. So dividing 8 by 2 would be having 4. So I'll mark the 4 on each of these lines I made already. Let me label them so you don't get confused. So remember that this is our upper chest line, which at times can be called bust line. So upper chest line, or you call the bust line. Then this is the bust point, and this will be your under bust, while this is your waist line. All right. So I'll go ahead to mark my 4 inches, which is our bust span divided into 4. So I've gone ahead to connect the lines. So now, since what you're going to use for that allowance, whatever number you're going to use for your that allowance depends on how big the bust is. Yeah. So to form the bust cup, if it's a person with a bust of 45, 48 and above, when you use 2.5, it will give you that effect you want. But since the bust you're working for isn't all that big, then I'll be using 0.75 inches on both sides. So I'll be marking that 0.75 inches on the under bust line and on the waist line. So this is it. So I'll be using my curve tool to connect the lines together. So this point to this point, I'll position my curve tool and I'll make a line to connect them. For this part too, I'll do same. So this is the bust point. So you want to also connect this line to touch this point, which is your bust point, and also connect here to this point. Like this, I wouldn't be turning my curve tool as I did here, but instead I'm going to turn it this way. So you could actually use a ruler, your choice. So when that is gotten, we want to, where's my tape? So on this bust point line, on the extreme or on the center front of this bust point line, you want to go up by an inch. On that point that you marked an inch, you want to go in by 0.5. So I'll just connect them together. Yeah. Particular point on this under bust line from the center front, I'll mark 1.5 inch. So I'll just keep it this way, making sure that the 1.5 inches is touching this intersection here. And then I'll place the tape and make my little mark of 1.5. So to draw the curve that will be coming this way, I'll simply have to make sure that it is aligned while coming to this part. So whatever it takes, which includes me moving this tool to get, or you could even use a ruler to do it. So I just used a pen to help me get the outline. I could actually use my hand this time to do it. Let me use a ruler instead. So now to just neaten this line, I'll use the curve tool from this point. So that's that. Make sure that we got 1.5 the 1.5 mark we marked from here. We made sure that it was touched. To make the cup that will be coming to this other side, what I'll simply do is to take an inch in from the original measurement. That is from the original line. That is the exact fit of your body, the measurement, whatever you've gotten. I'll take an inch in, and it is on this line that I'll make the other curve come. Take my ruler and I'll go ahead to draw my curve. Notice how I'm turning this. Yeah. So I've gotten the curve for this. So I just want to smoothen this edge. So you could actually use a freehand method to just make the curve. So I'm not satisfied with the way here is a little bit angled. So for you, while doing yours, make sure that it is well angled. For me, when cutting, I would know that yeah, this place should be more in a circular manner. This particular part. Sorry, I didn't know that my camera stopped filming for a moment. So and it didn't capture what I did here and here. So I'm going to recap. So I wasn't satisfied with this thing that I did here. So what I did was I placed my pattern curve to just make this smooth curve here, that is here. I just placed it here and placed it on this 1 inch line that I came in by. So just in this way, and then I drew a line. So that was just that, and I'm even more satisfied with what I did here. Okay, and I also feel I should do the same here too, just on this curve here. Okay, yeah, so it looks better. Yeah, so what I went ahead to do was, and I changed my marker to do what I was about to do here, so you would understand. So what I did here was I measured the distance between the bust point and under bust, and I placed it on this part. So after marking it, as you can see, I don't know if it shows the red marker. Yeah. So after marking it, I then for you to understand, I connected the line to this line. So what I'm simply going to do is just make a short straight line, which will still be based on this red line here. So from this new line I just made, the same thing I marked here is what I'm going to be marking here too, which will be 0.5 on this side and 0.5 on the other side, 0.75 rather, and also 0.75 on this side. So as we did for this one, I'm going to be connecting the lines to touch the bust point. So now, what I'm going to do is to connect this from this point. I'm going to connect up to here, and I'm going to connect here down here. So now, for people who are making the two-piece corset, they could actually cut around and start making their corset. But because we're making this one with three-piece and we're making it this cupped, I'm going to transfer these measurements on the sides. And how are we going to achieve that? That's what we're going to do. So we have 0.75 from this point to this point. You have 0.75, right? Now see, from the bust point line, if you divide 0.75, whatever you have, if you used 2 on this part and you used 2 on this part and you used 2 here, 2 here, to do what we did here, whatever you have, you just divide. If you used 2 on this part, you're going to divide that 2 and put an inch here, put another inch here. If you used 2 from this point to this point, wherever your 2 stopped, you're going to divide your 2 and then you mark 1 inch here and you mark 1 inch here, from this line, from this particular, from the bust point line. So for me, since I used 0.75 on this part, if I divide 0.75 by 2, it will give me 0.375. So I'm going to measure 0.375 on this part and 0.375 on this part, 0.375 on this part and 0.375 on this fine part. From so that is exactly what I have marked. Make sure that you place your tape on the bust point line to make your markings. So these are what I got, and then I'm going to connect these little dots I've made to the bust point line. So what you're simply doing is you're moving moving these dots to both sides to give you this effect. So I went ahead to blend these lines. So this red line we've made, we've actually moved it to these sides. So there's no red line here. You're just, I mean, these red lines, this dot here is no longer here. You're just seeing it. You're just seeing it. So just imagine that these lines are not here and that they've been moved to these both sides. What I'm going to do is I'll measure this. That's 0.75 that I have here. I'm going to mark it here on this point that is on top. Just imagine there's a line coming this way. I'll just mark the 0.75 and mark. And the same thing for this side. And then from this mark, I'll just connect to this, to the peak of the edge of the cup. You shouldn't be worried because by the time you fold here, you see that this place will come back to the original point you made. So I'll do the same thing to this mark we've made here. When you're done with the corset, the next thing you're going to do is to add your allowance. Is to add back whatever you've gotten to the sides. And I'll mark the same thing I got here also here. And then you can go ahead to add your same allowance if you're using 0.5 or an inch or 2 inches, whatever seam allowance you want to add here, you go ahead to add. And so I went ahead to cut. I went ahead to make my labeling so that when I'm cutting on my fabric, I wouldn't be confused. So this is the band, and this is the center. This is the band, this is the center, and this is the side. So I'll keep this aside. I made sure that this line here touches this other one. And so I want it to be aligned, because if you cut your fabric, you notice that this place will be more and the other place will be more. So for everything to be aligned, I'm going to be cutting off this part. So when that is cut off, it aligns, and even when it is placed here, it still fits. These are all we'll be needing, and then you can go ahead to cut on your fabric. I just want everything to align and sit well, so that's why I made that cut. So when I sew together from the midpoint to here, it's going to align and there will be no remaining fabric. So now when you are cutting on your fabric, remember to place your allowance. If I sellotape this, just as I did to this, if I sellotape this piece I have here, just like I did to this, you'd see that this exactly looks like this particular one. So that is how to draft this corset. Soon I'll be making a video on how to sew this particular corset. So this is simply how to draft a basic corset, a basic 3-piece corset, a 3-piece cup corset, whatever you call it. So that's just it. The back isn't complicated at all. If you have a basic knowledge of how to make darts, like normal darts for the back and the front, rather for the back of the body's pattern, then you have no problem at all. It will be very easy for you. So I have this little paper that I already cut. I used it for a particular pattern. So since it's remaining, I said, why not use it for this instead of using a whole paper again. So I hope you'll bear with me for using this little and short paper. So I already assumed that from here to here, since we won't be needing any of these parts though, since I'm not going to be using this for any yoke, yeah. So I just assumed that from this part, or you can also assume that from this part is my upper chest line, while this is the 10, which is the bust point, not like we've been using it for this back pattern though, and this is the under bust, and this is the waist line, right? So the same thing we did at the front is what we're also going to be doing here at the back. So 4 inches, 4, 4, and 4, and of course we connect the lines. Yeah. So the same thing we did at the front, we measured 0.75 here and 0.75 here. So we're also going to be doing. Here will be your opening allowance. Yeah. So whatever you choose to put here, you can put. And so I'll take my ruler and position it in a way that it will touch this line and this line when I draw a line. I mean this point and this point when I connect with a line. Just I'll measure my bust divided by 4. my waist also divided by 4, and connect the lines to connect the dot to the line, or connect my markings with the line, whichever one. So this is it. This is the back piece. Very easy, the back pattern. So I'm just checking if it matches, if it matches with our front pattern. So of course it does. So I'll go ahead to mark 2 more inches from the chest line point. Okay, the bust point gives us 2 inches already. So what I'm simply going to do is, so what I've just done is to extend the depth of the neckline of the back bodice. All right, so it still matches the front at this point, but then when it continues at the back, it goes down. So what you do is you add your, make sure that you add whatever you've taken from here back, and then you add whatever seam allowance you want to add, and that's that for the back bodies. So make sure to subscribe and like, share to whoever you know may have difficulty in doing this particular pattern. And if you have any question, make sure to put your question on the comment section. And that's that for this video. Thank you for watching.